when you're finished plastering your entire first layer, this has to be dry to move on to the next step. So if this is still wet, you need to go put your board in your class cabinet on your shelf, and then what you can do is get a whiteboard and a whiteboard marker and your photograph and begin practicing drawing your contour lines for your landscape. So I laminated your photos so they are in plastic so that when you're working at your table and you've got the wet plaster in the water, it's not going to ruin the photo if it drips on the photo. But I'm going to take mine out of the plastic just for this demo. Okay, so you need to figure out what position do you want to create your project in. It can be in a vertical position or a horizontal position. So looking at this photo, I'm going to keep mine in a horizontal position. And what I'm going to try and identify is my lines that make up this landscape, the background, middle ground, and foreground. So I'm looking at the edge for this photo of the tree line and the mountain edge here. Looking at this line that divides the water from the tree. This shape of this building, that's my point of emphasis. Kind of this line in the water's edge. And I have a reflection in mind, so I would have to draw the contour lines of these tree lines and the mountain edge here because it's a reflection of the trees on the water. So on my whiteboard, I'm going to begin to practice that, just creating those contour lines. So I'm going to begin to sketch in my horizon line. You would look for your horizon line where the sky meets the ground and what that line looks like. Mine is straight across because I'm looking at a lake. Yours might not be straight across. It might be more jaggedy. And then mine came up a little bit because I had this grassy knoll. And now I'm going to draw the contour edge that represents where the sky meets the mountain range back here. It was kind of jaggedy. And then I'm going to recreate the tops of the tree line that I see on my photo. So remember that you're trying to be inspired by your photo, but you do not have to recreate it exactly like your photo because we're sculpting. It is a lot more difficult to sculpt than it is to draw or paint. So you might have to simplify some of your designs. You might have to eliminate some of the details simply to make it into a sculpture. So that might represent my tree line. And then I've got this edge that was a water line. And another edge where the grass kind of met the sand that went into the cove. And then my point of emphasis was the structure of the building. So I want to kind of break that down into basic shapes. So that shape kind of looked like that. And then I have a reflection on the water. So I'm going to try to reflect the same sort of tree shapes. So for me it was kind of these triangular shapes. And that's going to be drawn down there. So I did not take the time to draw every single tree trunk and every single branch on the tree trunks because what I'm doing is just preparing my steps to bring these shapes into 3D pieces from plaster. So for those of you waiting for your plaster to dry, that's what I want you to practice. Get a whiteboard, practice drawing out your contour edges. For those of you who were able to finish the entire front surface with plaster last class, then you are going to also be working with your contour lines. So, if you need to, still get a whiteboard, still practice on the whiteboard first so that you're more confident when you get to the board and you put the drawing on the board. So, I'm going to be using a pencil to now transfer these contour lines directly onto the plaster, or I can look at my photograph either way when I do this. So I'm going to lightly sketch out my horizon line. My horizon line was straight across. Yours might not be. You got to look at your photo. This was my grassy knoll. This was the kind of the sandy shore. I had a building here that was my point of emphasis. And then I had a mountain range and a mountain range, so it was a reflection. And then I had all these pointy triangle shapes that were the tops of my trees. And I know that I'm going to have to simplify my tree line just to make it possible to create from plaster. Okay, so this is my beginning sketch to know where to start to build up my plaster from. So now I need to look at my photo and I need to figure out what is my background, my middle ground, and my foreground. So when we create this, your base layer that you already finished is your background. In my photo, it's my sky above the treetop. What I'm going to start to build up are the 3D pieces. So my middle ground is going to be higher than my background. My foreground is going to be the thickest, highest pieces that I sculpt. So I know that I don't need to add any more plaster in my background. That one's done. So now I'm going to begin to build up my middle ground. So for me, the mountain range and the tree lines are going to be my middle ground. And then the building, the grass, and this lake right here, that's going to be my foreground. So when I'm ready, I'm going to take my plaster pieces and I'm going to dip them in water, and now I'm going to start to shape these. So I can crumple up the plaster, and I just want my middle ground to be slightly higher than my background. So I might leave it 1 piece thick, and I'm just going to kind of smush that around. I can push that with my finger to kind of keep that in the areas I want it to be in. And then I'm going to smooth that out, meaning I want to fill in the little plaster gauze holes. I don't want to see the holes anymore. Okay, so now I'm going to get another piece, dip it in water, and I'm going to start to fill in this part of my middle ground. Another piece, fill in this way, and I'm going around that building because the building's going to be its own 3D piece. Alright, so now for me to finish my trees, I need to get these little triangle pieces filled in with plaster. So, the strips that you already cut might need to be cut smaller. So for me, I know that I need to cut this down into smaller pieces to begin to sculpt those triangle tops. So now I'm just going to work with a little piece, and I'm just going to fold that to begin to build in the triangle top pieces here and along the way. And you would proceed in the same way, squishing up the plaster, rolling it, folding it, and really trying to make that fit inside your pencil line. And remember that your middle ground needs to be slightly higher than your background. And then I'm going to finish that all the way across this top edge of the tree line and where the sky meets the ground over on the left side. And then I'm going to move on to building up my foreground or my thickest areas on this sample.